Antidepressant prescriptions in the United States increased by over 3,000% between 1971 and 2023. Not 30%, not 300%, 3,000. And in that same window, by almost every measurable standard, people have more tools, more options, more connectivity, and more access to knowledge than any generation in recorded history. Yet they are more exhausted, more anxious, and more defeated than ever. Something is producing that gap, and the explanation most people reach for is wrong. This episode is not about productivity culture or social media addiction or the collapse of community. Those are real phenomena. But they are symptoms of something deeper, a structural condition that has been hiding in plain sight, embedded not in our habits or our culture, but in the architecture of money itself. Most people never look there.
The question is why they are working harder and feeling emptier, and the answer is not psychological. Welcome to The Hard Cap. This is not a channel about price, it's a channel about civilization.
The first explanation that feels right, and it does feel right, is attention fragmentation. The argument runs like this. Smartphones shattered the deep work that rest requires. Social media engineered compulsive loops. The always-on economy colonized recovery time. We are overstimulated, under-recovered, and the cure is digital detox, boundary setting, and mindfulness practice. There is genuine research behind this. Average screen time for American adults reached over 7 hours per day by 2023. Sleep quality declined measurably across the same decades that smartphone adoption accelerated. The attention economy is real, and its predatory design is documented. But here is the problem with stopping there. The attention fragmentation argument treats the symptom as the cause. It assumes that if you could only put the phone down, stillness would return naturally. It says the exhaustion is a technology problem, and technology problems have technology solutions. That analysis doesn't survive a single hard question. Why are people reaching for their phones in the first place? What are they checking? Financial news, side hustle updates, investment portfolios. The compulsive checking is not random stimulation seeking. It is, in many cases, the behavior of someone who cannot afford to stop watching. The second explanation goes deeper, and it is more sophisticated. The argument, developed most sharply by critics of late capitalism, is that hustle culture is not spontaneous. It is manufactured. Productivity branding turned workers into complicit participants in their own exploitation. The achievement subject, as the philosopher Byung Chul named it in his 2010 work, Burnout Society, is not coerced from outside. There is no external master saying you must not rest. Instead, the compulsion is internalized. The worker becomes the exploiter of himself. Han's diagnosis is precise and worth taking seriously. He identified a historical shift. Disciplinary societies operated through prohibition. The prison, the asylum, the factory floor as sites of external coercion. Achievement societies operate through permission. You can, you should, you are capable of more. The whip was replaced by the motivational poster, and the result, paradoxically, is more exhaustion, not less, because there is no external limit left to push against. The analysis is genuinely powerful, and it points to something real about modern psychological suffering. Depression, ADHD, burnout. Han argues these are not diseases of deficiency, but diseases of excess. Too much positivity, too much permission, too much self-directed striving with no ceiling. Most people stop the analysis here. Don't, because Han's framework, for all its precision, never asks the most obvious follow-up question. If the achievement subject is a modern phenomenon, if this particular form of exhaustion is historically specific, then something must have produced it. Cultural shifts do not arrive without causes. The internalized compulsion to strive without rest did not simply emerge from the air in the late 20th century. Something changed, something structural. Han gestures vaguely at late capitalism and moves on. That is where the analysis breaks down. The third explanation tries to answer the why with a social one. Community collapse. The argument is that modernity dissolved the meaning structures, religious institutions, stable neighborhoods, multi-generational family bonds, that once gave exhaustion a context, a container, a reason. Robert Putnam documented the decline of civic participation in bowling alone. published in 2000. Loneliness rates have climbed steadily for decades. The cure proposed is institutional reform, social reconnection, the rebuilding of communal life. This is not wrong. It is simply insufficient, because it still does not explain the timing. Loneliness did not spike randomly. Community bonds did not dissolve on a random cultural schedule. Something happened that made the economics of community increasingly difficult to sustain. Something that made geographic stability harder. That made single-income households mathematically impossible for most families. That made the time required for deep civic participation a luxury rather than a norm. Real wages for American workers peaked in 1973, just 2 years after Nixon closed the gold window on August 15, 1971, and have not sustainably recovered in inflation-adjusted terms for the bottom 60% of earners in the 5 decades since. That is not a cultural fact. That is a monetary fact, and it begins to explain something none of the previous frameworks could. The exhaustion is not primarily a technology problem, or a branding problem, or a loneliness problem. It is a math problem. When wages stop growing in real terms, when the cost of housing and education and healthcare continues to climb, the amount of labor required to maintain a stable life increases, quietly, relentlessly, without anyone declaring it. The US M2 money supply grew from approximately $685 billion in 1971 to over $21 trillion by 2022, a 30 times expansion in 5 decades. That money did not arrive evenly. It moved through asset prices first, through equities, through real estate, through financial instruments, long before it reached wages or savings accounts. The person who held assets watched their purchasing power grow. The person who held savings, or held still, watched it erode. Between 1971 and 2023, U.S. home prices rose approximately 2,400% in nominal terms. Median wages rose roughly 700% across the same period. That gap is not an accident of real estate markets. It is the mechanical output of a monetary system that continuously punishes the person who stops, who saves in cash, who steps back, who rests. Stillness, under this system, is not a lifestyle choice. It is a financial penalty. And that is a different kind of exhaustion than anything Byung Chul described. Not the exhaustion of excess permission, not the exhaustion of fragmented attention. The exhaustion of a mathematical trap, where the only rational response to monetary architecture is to keep moving, keep optimizing, keep striving, because the alternative is to slowly lose ground to a system that never stops expanding the money supply around you. The question is no longer why people are tired. The question is what, if anything, could possibly make rest economically survivable again. The Federal Reserve's own research confirms it. From 1983 to 2019, the top 1% of households captured 38% of all wealth gains. The bottom 50% captured 2%. This was not a labor market failure. It was a monetary expansion mechanism working exactly as designed. The Cantillon effect is the name for what happens when new money enters an economy unevenly. Those closest to the source, banks, asset holders, institutions, receive the new purchasing power before prices adjust. Those furthest from the source, wage earners, savers, anyone holding cash, receive it last, after inflation has already done its quiet work. The printing press does not redistribute wealth randomly. It redistributes it directionally, away from stillness and toward motion. And this is where Han's achievement subject stops being a cultural observation and becomes a mechanical inevitability. The person striving compulsively is not suffering from a philosophy problem. They are responding rationally to a monetary environment where stopping is punished in real time, every single year, without exception. The exhaustion is not irrational. It is the only logical response to the structure. Consider what it actually means to hold still inside a fiat monetary system. Your savings denominated in dollars lose purchasing power to inflation. The Federal Reserve targets 2% annually and frequently exceeds it. The assets that outpace inflation, equities, real estate, private credit, require constant attention, active management, risk exposure. Even the act of preserving what you have demands perpetual engagement with the system. There is no neutral position. Cash decays. Inaction costs. This is the trap that none of the earlier explanations touched. Technology companies did not design the compulsive checking. Hustle culture did not invent the inability to stop. The monetary architecture did. The compulsive monitoring of portfolios, the side hustle calculus, the relentless optimization of income streams, these behaviors are downstream of a system that made passivity economically lethal. Han described a society of self-exploitation. He was correct. He simply did not identify the incentive structure that makes self-exploitation the dominant survival strategy. The question the hook posed, why people are working harder, longer, and with more tools than any generation in history, and feeling more exhausted, more anxious, and more defeated, has been sitting underneath every answer that felt almost right. Not technology, not culture, not loneliness, something more foundational, more invisible, and far more difficult to protest or opt out of. Bitcoin's fixed supply of 21 million coins, enforced by its protocol since the Genesis block on January 3, 2009, is the first monetary system in recorded history that makes saving structurally appreciating in real terms. Not because Bitcoin promises growth, because its supply cannot expand. When the denominator is fixed, the human effort that flows through it, the real productivity, the real value created in the world, accumulates rather than evaporates. For the first time in 50 years, a person who stops and holds is not automatically punished. That sentence needs to be held still for a moment because its implications reach further than investment thesis. If the compulsive striving of the modern achievement subject is not a psychological disorder, but a rational adaptation to monetary architecture, if the exhaustion Han diagnosed is structurally produced by a system that penalizes rest, then the cure is not contemplative practice, not digital detox, not social reconnection. The cure is a change in the underlying structure, and structural cures require structural interventions. Bitcoin is not a productivity tool. It is not a self-improvement philosophy. It does not tell you to hustle less, or meditate more, or reconnect with your community, though none of those things are bad. What it does is alter the mathematical ground beneath the decision to rest. It transforms stillness from a financial penalty into a financially neutral or appreciating position. It removes the punishing asymmetry between motion and pause that fiat money encodes into every economic decision a person makes. Han drifted, in his later work, toward contemplative passivity as the antidote, a return to slowness, to vita contemplativa, to the resistance of acceleration through deliberate stillness. It is a beautiful prescription for an individual. It is not a structural solution. You cannot meditate your way out of a monetary system that confiscates the purchasing power of your savings while you sit. The achievement subject does not need to be told to slow down. They need the ground to change beneath them so that slowing down does not mean losing ground. The antidepressant prescription rate that has climbed more than 3,000% since 1971 is not evidence of a mental health crisis that arrived from nowhere. It is the cumulative pharmacological response to a civilization that stopped allowing its people to rest, not through prohibition, not through coercion, but through the quiet, relentless mathematics of a monetary system that turns every moment of stillness into a liability. The achievement subject is not a cultural accident, it is a monetary product. And the monetary product of fiat, the exhausted, self-exploiting, perpetually optimizing human being who cannot stop because stopping means falling behind, is not a failure of individual character or collective psychology. It is the predictable output of a system whose architecture was finalized on August 15, 1971, and whose consequences have been accumulating in the bodies and minds of working people ever since. Han diagnosed the disease with precision and stopped short of the cause. The cause was always the money. And the cure, the only cure that operates at the same structural level as the disease, is money that does not punish you for being still. If this episode made you think differently, subscribe. New episodes every week. And if you want to go deeper, there's more waiting for you. This is not a channel about price, it's a channel about civilization.